In this topic, we will study the wave propagation introduction, and this is a whole area which deals with the calculation and prediction of the behavior of different waves. Waves can be one-dimensional, two-dimensional, or three-dimensional also. But we will just introduce and we will restrict our discussion to one-dimensional waves only. So I will just quickly give you an overview using an example about this theory. So let's start, and for that demonstration I will use the axial vibration in the rod example. So if I have a rod, a vertical or horizontal rod which is applied with an axial force at the its tip point, is starting point, and because of that axial force, the wave or the disturbance propagated at that point, it basically originates at that point and then it propagates along the length of the uh, member. So a wave is basically a energy or a disturbance which propagates from one point to another point. It travels and it can be seen as a traveling displacement or a traveling stress, you can say. So dynamic response of a uniform rod to a suddenly applied axial loading, it can be seen as a propagation of a stress and deformation wave along its length. So if you apply the uh, impulse load, a sudden load at one end of this axial rod, you can see the deformation and the stress propagating or traveling from that point to the other end. And this is what a wave is. The response for this traveling deformation or traveling response can be obtained by modal analysis also. But you may need to add a very large number of modal responses. You just need to superimpose them in order to obtain a reasonably close approximation of the wave propagation phenomena. Maybe you need to add 100 or 200 modes in order to actually capture the traveling displacement, because different modes will add up and their summation will actually give us a simulation of the traveling of displacement. So for example, if any force applied at that end produce a displacement which look like this, we know now that this displacement will travel towards the right hand side. So you may need to add maybe hundreds of vibration modes to actually capture that travel of the wave. So at one instant it is here, but in the next instant maybe it is here. Then in the next instant maybe it will be here. So that wave or deformation will keep its shape constant, but it will move along the length. So now we are dealing with a traveling response, a deformation which is moving along the length. So that's why uh, we may need to add maybe hundreds of vibration modes to actually capture the complete travel of that displacement which is produced initially at that starting point. Alternatively, what we can do is that we can use the wave propagation theory to more accurately or easily capture that traveling deformation as well as the traveling stress along the length of that element. So modal analysis may be used, but you may need to add a large number of modal responses, or you need to include maybe large number of vibration modes in the analysis to accurately capture that traveling wave or traveling disturbance. Alternatively, you can use wave propagation theory. So before I start, let me give you an example. Here you can see, let me play this clip, and it shows the propagation of one type of a common wave which is called a P wave or a compressional wave. In this case, you can see here that at one end of this solid material, there is a disturbance which is created, and that disturbance traveled along the length such that each point in that material is moving to and fro in the direction of the propagation of wave. This is called a compressional wave or a P wave. On the other hand, you also have another type of wave which is called S wave. Let me show you that one also. Here you can see this is also a disturbance or a deformation which is traveling along the length of that material. But this time now every particle is moving up and down, and that movement is perpendicular to the direction of this direction of the wave. So this is called a shear wave or S wave. This is another kind of a moving disturbance or a different kind of a wave. But the basic concepts or principles or basic mathematics for describing different kinds of wave have a lot of common things in them. So for the coming back to the same example of the axial vibration of a rod, one approach was to use the classical modal analysis, where basically you try to solve the governing equation of motion using the idea of mode shapes. So you first calculate the mode shapes and natural frequencies, and then you describe the response as a summation or superposition of different modes or modal responses. On the other hand, it is also possible to derive the wave propagation response directly from the partial differential equation of that uniform rod. We can directly solve that partial differential equation to get the wave propagation response or moving deformation response directly also by solving the same partial differential equation. Instead of invoking the idea of mode shapes, now we can go for an alternate solution, and that will lead us to actually describing that physical phenomena of a moving or traveling wave. So let's come back to our original partial differential equation for an axial vibration of a uniform rod. So this was the original equation. Now we know that this is the governing equation of motion for a rod which is applied with an axial force at its one end, some P of t, or you can also describe it in this form, maybe vertical, but then P of t will also be vertical. So this is the governing equation of motion. It simply says that mass times partial 2u over partial t square minus EA, where E is the elastic modulus and A is the cross-sectional area of that rod, times partial 2u over partial x square equal to 0. And this equation is valid in the range of 0 to L, x equal to 0 to L. Now the boundary conditions which this uh, axial rod, uniform rod has is that at fixed end, we know that the displacement is 0, it is fixed. So u at x equal to L comma t will be 0. So for all time instances, the displacement at x equal to L or the fixed end is 0. So this is x equal to 0 and this is x equal to L. So at x equal to L we have fixed support. Similarly, if we draw it like this, then this will be x equal to 0 and this point will be x equal to L. At the free end, we will have the displacement gradient equal to 0, or in fact the strain at the free end. In this case here, if there is no applied force, then this displacement gradient was also 0. But we now know that it is applied with some applied force P of t, and therefore the displacement gradient at the free end or the strain at that free end will be applied force divided by EA, and that we know already that this stress is equal to the Young modulus E times the strain, and from there we know that P of t divided by cross-sectional area will become stress, and then this will be equal to the Young modulus times partial u over partial x. Minus sign shows the compressive stress because the applied force is just assumed in the direction of the propagation of wave. So this applied force is directly inducing a wave which will travel along the length in the rightward direction. The stress at that uh, any point t and any distance x and at any time t will be described by this equation 3. It will be simply E times the displacement gradient partial u over partial x. Now let's try to solve this equation 1 using the theory of wave propagation and not using the classical modal analysis. So let's define a new constant c, and that will be also comprised of three new constants, e a over m square root. Let's define it as c. This definition will help us in simplifying this equation 1, and then we will get a simplified form that can be easy to solve. So this is for our own simplification. This m over a can be written as rho, which is the mass density of the rod. So the mass, the total mass divided by the cross-sectional area will become the mass density. So now we have a new constant c, which is under root of the Young's modulus of the material in which the wave is being traveled, or the material of the rod, divided by the mass density of the rod. This definition will simplify our calculations, because if we divide this whole equation by m, we will cancel m here, but here EA over m will become c square. So this constant will simply be replaced by c square. So now we will have a relatively simpler form of that equation by the introduction of this new constant c. This is that simplified equation. So previously, if you remember, that while using classical modal analysis, our basic idea was to expand the displacement in terms of modal coordinates. So we were basically uh, employing this following assumption, that u of x comma t, the response, is sum of the contributions of different mode shapes. So each mode shape is multiplied by its uh, modal amplitude qi, and then the total response will be the u of x comma t. Here we will not use this equation. We will alternatively use another approach for the solution of the same equation 5, and that approach is that we found that the solution can be alternatively expressed as equation 6, that instead of using that equation, we will use this general form of the solution for that equation 5, and that general form is u of x comma t is equal to some function which is the function of both x and t, the space and time, but not simple x and t. In fact, it should be a function of x minus ct. Some c is the same constant we just assumed, plus another function which is the function of x plus ct. This is the form of the solution which we just assumed for this solution, and in the next slide I will show you that this form of the solution, or these two functions f1 and f2, will satisfy the equation 5, but they will be general solution, and we will need the boundary conditions to actually determine the specific f1 and f2. So f1 and f2 are currently an arbitrary functions of x minus ct and x plus ct, and currently we don't know what is f1 and f2. All we just fixed is that they are functions of x minus ct and x plus ct respectively. So c, we know now, it is a constant depending upon the material properties, but functions, actual functions, we don't know yet. They are arbitrary and they will depend on the boundary conditions. Let's quickly check, just put these two functions in the original equation, and let's see if they satisfy the original governing equation or not. So let's say that u of x comma t is equal to, the solution is equal to the first function, because if we can prove that these two functions f1 and f2 are separately the solutions of the governing equation, then their sum will be the general solution. The sum of two solutions is also a solution. So let's first put u of x comma t equal to f1 x minus ct, where we currently don't know f1, but this is the form of the solution. If this form satisfies the governing equation of motion, then we can just explore further or try to solve further to actually calculate the specific function f1. For simplicity, let's put x minus ct equal to y. So basically we are saying that u x comma t is equal to some f1 of y. So let's take the first partial with respect to t for this assumed form of the solution. So let's take partial over partial t. On the left hand side it will be this. On the right hand side we can apply the chain rule, because partial f1 of y, because this x minus ct is y, over partial y times partial y over partial t. So here we are applying partial over partial t, but here we are also applying the same partial over partial t, but we are using the chain rule now. We know already that uh, this thing is actually equal to partial f1 y over partial t. So we just expanded that and we introduced partial y here and partial y here also. The reason why we did is that we know now that the partial y over partial t can be determined because y is x minus ct. So we can take its differential with respect to t. So partial y over partial t will simply be minus c, minus c. So we can simply put minus c for this term, and that original term can remain like that. We can again take one partial over partial t, and in that case this will become the minus will become positive and it will become c square partial 2 f1 y over partial y square. So this is one more time we have taken partial over partial t. Same thing we can do with partial over partial x also. The same solution which we assumed, let's take partial over partial x, and this will become partial f1 y over partial x, and for partial x we just expand that using chain rule. So instead of directly writing partial x here, I am writing partial y times partial y over partial x, and again I can know partial y over partial x, that will become just 1, because if I take y equal to x minus ct, and if I take partial over partial x, it will simply result equal to 1. So I just get this partial u over partial x as this term, because this term become 1. I can take one partial again, partial 2 u over partial x square, and it will simply become partial 2 f1 y over partial y square. So now let's put these two results which we just get uh, by just assuming the form of the general solution in this manner. Let's put in the original equation. This is the original equation, left hand side of that equation, and we already have calculated that this one is this whole thing. So let's put this, replace this first term with this whole thing, and minus c square, this thing we have already calculated. This is our second result which we have just calculated. So minus c square times this whole thing. So we know now, we can see that these will be cancelled and this right hand side will become 0. And we now know that the original equation was also having right hand side equal to 0. So therefore the form of the solution which we just assumed is satisfying the original equation. So we have assumed a solution form u of x comma t equal to some function f1, which is a function of x minus ct, where c is a constant depending upon the material properties. So this is always true for any f1 of y, because currently we just keep f1 as any arbitrary constant and we still satisfy the equation. So for any f1 which is the function of x minus ct, it will be a solution of the original governing equation. Similarly, we can also show using the same exercise that any other function which is the function of x plus ct, that will also be satisfying the same equation, the original governing equation. So that is also a solution of that equation. Currently we don't know, I again repeat, we don't know f1 and f2, but we know that they are functions of x minus ct and x plus ct. So therefore the general solution of this governing equation of motion will be the sum of these two functions. These two functions are individually the solution of the equation, so their sum will be the general solution. So equation 6 is the general solution form of the same governing equation of motion, which we just tried to solve or started to solve uh, by using an approach other than the modal analysis. Let's now see what is the physical meaning of this f1 function, which is the function of x minus ct. So let's consider a case where f1 is a known function. So let's assume that it is a sine function. So f1 of y is a sine function such that that from 0 to some distance a along the y-axis, where y is x minus ct, x minus ct. So up to some distance a, it has a sign variation, and beyond a and before 0, the value of the function is 0. So it's like a one half sine pulse. So before 0 and after a, the value of the function is 0, but in the form, be between 0 and a, the function is following a sign variation. So let's plot that function now for different values of t. So this is for t equal to 0. If you put t equal to 0, y will become simply equal to x, and in that if you put y equal to x, sine pi x over a will be your function. So for t equal to 0, the function is sine pi x over a. You can simply plot it like that. It will start from 0 and then it will follow that half sine pulse, and then it will again become 0. Let's now put t equal to 1 second, and again plot that same function. For t equal to 1, y will be simply x minus 1c, in fact x minus c, and when you put x minus c in this here, y will be in that case x minus c. So when you put that and plot that function as a function of x, then you will get this half sine pulse, but it will be displaced by a distance c. You will see, if you plot that one, you will again get a half sine pulse, but not starting from t equal to 0, but starting from t equal to uh, starting at t equal to 1, but starting from some distance equal to c. C will be the same c, this one. So which means that this small c is the distance which this shape traveled in 1 second. For example, c meters in 1 second. So which means that I can say that this c is the velocity of that shape, velocity of that shape, because the same shape traveled in c distance in 1 second. So it's the velocity of that shape. If I plot the same function for t equal to 2 seconds, put t equal to 2 here, and it will become, y will become x minus 2c. You put y equal to x minus 2c and plot for x, you will get this shape again, but it will be displaced by a distance 2c. So at t equal to 2 second, the same shape has traveled equal to a distance 2c. So this again confirms that c is the velocity of the travel of that shape. So now you know the physical meaning of this function f1 also, that why we have assumed it in this form, because it can capture the traveling of a particular shape. In this case, that shape will be the displacement shape. The displacement shape or that disturbance will travel along the length axis or x-axis if it has this form f1 x minus ct. So f1 is any function. In this case we just demonstrated using a sine function, but it may have any shape. For example, it may have any this kind of a shape. After 1 second it will be just the same shape will be there, but it will be displaced by a distance equal to c. After 2 seconds it will be displaced by 2c. So the same shape will be like this. So whatever shape or function you have, it will just travel with a velocity equal to c if it is a function of x minus ct. So this is the physical meaning of this function. Now if you repeat that exercise for x plus ct, you will get the same form, but the direction of the traveling or wave traveling will be in the opposite direction for x plus ct. So for x minus ct, wave traveling to the position on right with velocity c, as it is shown by these three figures. But for x plus ct, the wave traveling to the position on left with velocity c. So for x plus ct function, the wave will travel in towards the left hand side. But for x minus ct, you will having a wave which is traveling towards right hand side. So you can repeat that exercise to confirm that. So these two functions are in fact two shapes which are traveling in opposite directions. The stress wave, because we know now that when a wave travels, not only the disturbance moves or travels, but the stress in that material also moves or travels. So that stress we know already that it is equal to the Young modulus time the displacement gradient. So if we put that solution which we have just found out, and that is f1 x minus ct plus f2 x plus ct. f1 and f2, again I repeat that they are the functions of boundary conditions, and currently we don't know what are actual functions for a given case. So we just keep them as f1 and f2. If we just take the partial over partial x, we will expand that and we will get this equation 8. So equation 8 is basically telling us the stress values at different x and t at different x distances and t time. So it is, again, since it is a function of x minus ct and x plus ct, so it is a traveling stress. It is a moving stress. With different times, you will see that the stress value is concentrated at one location, but after some time it will be concentrated towards left or right, depending upon which of the functions you are plotting. So this is partial over partial x of the first function, but that function will also be the resulting function will also be the function of x minus ct. Similarly, for the second term, whatever you will get, it will still be the function of x plus ct. You take partial over partial x, but the function variable will still remain same. So stress is now again will have the same form, that it will be one function, some g1, which is the function of x minus ct, and plus another function g2, which is the function of x plus ct. So here in this figure I give you an example, that let's say that this is that rod, and uh, this is the direction of wave. So let's say that this is the direction of wave, and let's say that this is the displacement profile or displacement function. So although it is the axial vibration or axial movement of the wave, but now this plot is basically showing that how the displacement of different points along the axial direction, the displacement is varying between different points. So the displacement started at this point, and that it increased to the second point. So let's call that as point A. It started at point A, and that it increased to a certain value at point B. So at A the displacement was 0, at B there was some displacement towards the right hand side. Displacement is not up and down, it is towards the right hand side. So the direction of wave is towards the right hand side. At point C, you again have some increased displacement. So B point has moved relatively to A, has moved toward the right. But C point has again moved relative to B point, because the displacement has increased from B to C. From C to, let's say, this new point which is D, again there is a sudden increase in displacement. So D point also moved towards the right hand side relative to point C. And let's say this last point is point E. E point have a displacement equal to 0, which means it doesn't move, but point D has a positive displacement which reduced to 0. So which means that this portion between D and E, that part of the rod will be in compression. But AB segment will be in tension because B point is moving rightward to relative to point A. So the segment AB is in tension. Segment BC is also in tension, but slightly less tension compared to the segment AB, because the increase is not that high, and the slope of that line from B to C is not as high as from A to B. But from C to D there is a sudden increase again in the slope. So C and D point, the CD segment will also be in tension, but very high tension, because D point will have a very high rightward movement compared to C point. But this DE segment will be in compression because D point is moving towards right, it has some positive displacement, but E point is not moving at all. So if I plot the stress distribution, it will look like this for the same rod, that point A to B is in some tensile stresses, positive stresses, let's say, and from B to C you again have positive stresses but lesser than the segment AB. From C to D you again have a very high tensile stresses, but from D to E you have a compression stress or negative stress. So this will be the profile of stress because of that displacement profile which we just showed as an example. So this shape is basically the F1 function. This is an example for F1. So let's see what are the boundary conditions, because now we are interested in actually calculating the F1 function and F2 function so that we can completely describe the wave travel, everything. So we need to understand the boundary conditions because F1 and F2 will depend on those boundary conditions. So in our case, which we are considering right now, we don't have any in-span loading. The only force which is applied is at this free end, and let's say that it is a drop hammer uh, and it is introduced at the top boundary by a drop hammer. So it is an impulse load which is applied at the free end. Let's assume and let's actually calculate F1 and F2 functions for one example case. So let's say that we are given with the impulse force, and let's say that it looks like a half sine pulse with an amplitude of 600 kips, and the duration of that impulse is 0.005 seconds, very short impulse. And let's try to calculate the F1 function, the solution basically for this example case. The very first thing which we will do is to calculate C value, because F1 is the function of x minus Ct. So C will be appearing here also. So first thing is to calculate C, and C is equal to Young modulus divided by the density, mass density, square root. So let's assume that this rod is first made of steel with steel given properties, and again we will repeat the same example. In fact, we will perform it for both steel and concrete. So for concrete you will have a different elastic modulus, and you will have a different properties, different dimensions, etc. The density also will be different. So the same force will be applied, you can say, first for steel and again for concrete. So the CS value will be representing the C value for steel, which will be very high, and for concrete value, for concrete the C will be relatively lower. So you can rightly guess right from here that the speed of the wave will be higher in steel compared to the concrete. So this C will have the units of velocity, feet per second in this case, 16,800 for steel and 9,600 for concrete. After you calculate C, let's apply the boundary conditions to calculate the F1 function. We now know that the stress at x equal to 0 is compressive, because let's say this is the point at x equal to 0, the topmost point. P of t is being applied, and this is the top layer or top level x equal to 0. That application of force will produce some deformation, and that stress which is being applied or produced by that force will be equal to sigma 0 comma t. This is x equal to 0, and t will be there, and that will be minus p of t applied force divided by the cross sectional area. So P of t divided by cross sectional area will be the stress at top, and minus sign will basically showing the compression stress. P of t is given already, it is given already. So let me go back, and here you can see that uh, P of t is given, the general form of the P of t is given. So let's put that here. So it will be simply, when you divide by cross sectional area, you will get this as P of t. Sorry, this is the sigma 0 comma t. This is the stress at top level. Now from equation 8, which is the equation for the stress, considering only the forward propagating wave, because we know already that the general solution for sigma x comma t is some constant g1, which is x minus ct, plus another g2, which is x plus ct. And we know now that x minus ct function is, if it is moving towards the right hand side, x plus ct will be moving towards left hand side. So in this case we are only considering, let's say, the forward propagating wave. So we are neglecting the second term. Let's assume that we are just interested in calculating the stress flow from this point of application of force up to the fixed support. So we are not interested in the reflection of the wave, we are only interested in just one way or forward propagation of the wave. In that case, sigma x comma t will be simply equal to the first function, which is the function of x minus ct. For steel case, we just put the subscript equal to s, so it will be x minus cs t, where cs is equal to this number for steel. Now we know now that sigma 0 comma t is equal to some g1, put x equal to 0, and that is known already. Sigma 0 comma t is given, that is the boundary condition. So that we all have already calculated here. So which means that we already now know the g1 function, and that is also a sinusoidal function. So this is the way we actually calculate the g1 function or any other function, that we actually use boundary conditions, and boundary conditions just include that original function of applied force which is given, and that applied function was sinusoidal. So we now know that g1 is also sinusoidal. One thing we can do to complete our solution for G1 is, which is for the stress, is that we rewrite the same sigma 0 comma t in the form which is G1 minus Cs of t, because x is 0 here. So G1 is just a function of minus Cs t. So we just rearrange the same thing to look like as some function which is the function of minus Cs into t. So this is what we are just mapping our solution, our boundary condition solution, with the original shape of the solution which we want to calculate. So if we just introduce x also in the original function, here also we can just introduce x. So sigma 0 comma t was given, was known already, but for sigma x comma t we will simply replace 0 with x. in the solution also. So here originally it was 0 in the original given boundary condition. We just replace it with x. So now our g1 function is complete. So this is our final, this final line is our final g1 function, which is describing the stress variation along the length, or stress traveling or movement along the length. If we plot this sigma x comma t, it will give us the stress movement, or how the stress is traveling along the length of this rod. Okay, let me repeat it. See, we have already known sigma 0 comma t, and that was from boundary condition. This point is, I think, clear, that we just put uh, x equal to 0 and in the boundary condition, because we know that sigma 0 comma t is equal to minus p of t divided by the cross sectional area, and p of t was given. So we just put that p of t and divide by area. Area was also given. So we get directly that sigma 0 comma t. Now we now know already that sigma 0 comma t is now known. But we also know that sigma x comma t is equal to, the general form is some g1 x minus ct. So why not we rearrange our known function so that it will become the function of x minus ct. If we rearrange our known function, make it a function of x minus ct, then it will be equal to g1, and g1 will be known. So this is also one way to actually, we basically doing it in reverse, that instead of directly finding g1, we are making what is known, we are making it same form as g1, and then it will be just g1 will be given or known directly or determined in this way. So sigma 0 comma t was given, it was basically coming from boundary condition. We rearranged it. We just write, because t was already there and c is a constant number which is having a value of 16,800. So we just rearranged it or write it in such a manner that now we wrote it as minus whatever is the constant number, it is being multiplied by minus CST. See, if you put CS equal to 16,800 and you calculate this whole constant thing, you will get the same pi over 0.005. So it's just making it forcefully a function of something which we know already. Similarly, this is for 0 comma t, so you can simply write it as 0 minus CS t. If you replace that 0 with x, it will be for any x value, it will be a general solution. Your G1 will be completed. So whatever was known, we just make it as G1 0 minus CT. We make its shape such that it becomes a function of 0 minus CT. And then when we make that shape, we replace 0 with x. And that sigma x comma t is now known. The summary is that we have already calculated sigma x comma t, which is again a sinusoidal function, and as we have seen that it should be the function of x minus ct, we have made it a function of x minus ct. It is a sinusoidal function, but this x minus ct term is basically making it a moving or traveling stress along the length. So this is the final sigma x comma t for this example case. Now let's plot that function and let's see how the stress will propagate from top to bottom, which is produced by a sinusoidal impulse loading caused by a drop hammer at that top. So because we know that the applied loading was like this. It was P of t and it was ending at 0.005. So let's plot the stress values at t equal to 0.005, which means at the end of the loading. So all you can do is that you can just replace t with 0.005. T is fixed, so now plot it as a function of x, and x is 0 here and x is L here. So when you plot it as a function of x now, at t equal to 0.005 for steel case, you will have this line, this yellow line, this line. So one thing which I forget to tell is that although we are doing it for an axial vibration of a rod, but you can think of it as a pile foundation, uh, which is uh, uh, which is having an impact loading from a drop hammer at the top. So we just assume that this pile foundation have no interaction with the soil which is here at the surface. So that soil is not interacting, or it is not modifying the nature of the propagation of wave. So we can just assume that pile as like freely floating uh, above the ground, but actually it can be, a pile can be considered or assumed for this example. So let's say that this is a steel pile which is subjected to a drop hammer at top. So this line will be our function for stress. So this is sigma x comma 0.005. So which means that now you are looking at the stress variation right at the end of the applied loading. What if we plot the same function for any time less than 0.005? Let's say 0.002 second. In that case, you are basically will be plotting the stress profile along the length even at the time when applied loading was continued, because this will be 0.002. So even applied loading is there and you are plotting the stress profile along the length of that rod. In that case, you may get this line, this line. So the stress is just started to develop at 0.002. Maybe this is 0.002. Similarly, if you plot it, let's say at 0.003, somewhere here, you may get this line, this one. So the stress at the top surface has slightly reduced, but now it has traveled slightly more towards the bottom side. So this line may be 0.003 or maybe 35. But at 0.005 time, when there was no applied force, the applied force is finished already, the top stress at the top level is 0, and now it is fully developed as a sinusoidal variation along the length of that rod. And now if you plot it for t greater than 0.005, you will see that it will travel towards downward direction. For example, let's plot the same function at 0.007 maybe. It will be like this. And for 0.009 it will be like this. It will travel. It will go, you can say, towards the downward side. So actually what we can simulate right now mathematically is the propagation of that stress travel. Stress propagation or its travel can be visualized. So we started with a mathematical solution for the governing equation of motion for the axial vibration of rod, and we have discovered or kind of developed a physical solution which is describing the propagation of a wave or stress values or stress shape basically. So the shape will remain same. The shape will still remain sinusoidal, but it will just travel along the length. So we have basically simulated mathematically the wave travel. So it is shown that the waveform in the rod is generated from the equilibrium at the boundary. Similarly, it can be shown that for concrete pile, you can also put the C value for concrete and you just plot for concrete this stress. You will see that if you plot it at t equal to 0.005, right at the end of the applied loading, you will get this sinusoidal shape of the stress. And you can compare it with the previous one. It was the shape profile or stress profile was spanning over 84 feet in this case, steel case. but for concrete it will be just spanning over 48 feet. Similarly, the C value for concrete was also smaller, which means the speed of the travel of that wave will also be lower for concrete and it will be higher for steel. So you can work out that example with real numbers and you will actually understand more. So this is the equation for sigma x comma t equal to 0.005. If you plot it for 0.006, maybe you will retain the same shape, everything same, but it will be just moved slightly towards the downward side, which is the direction of the propagation of wave. So we have actually calculated the stress sigma x comma t, which was having a form g1 x minus ct, the incident wave, basically the forward propagation of wave. We just have calculated the expression for that for a given applied loading, and we now know that if the given applied loading was sinusoidal sine function, the g1 function was also sinusoidal. The stress also, the produced stress was also sinusoidal shape, but that shape was being traveled from top and up to bottom. So this is a quick comparison between stress in steel pile at T equal to 0.005 at the end of the applied loading and in concrete pile. So you can see here that the peak value is less, the peak value of stress is less, although because the cross-sectional dimensions and everything, the material properties are different. So, but you can just understand the wave propagation into different materials. So this is a summary uh, of the two piles which are fixed at base and which are applied with a drop hammer at top. So let's now understand the wave reflection towards the end. Wave will hit the boundary condition on the opposite side. Here, if I go back, the wave will travel towards the downward direction, and this is the boundary condition. This is the other end. It can be fixed also, it can be free also. In both cases, the properties of the reflected wave will be different. Just remember now that we have assumed that u of t, u of x comma t was having this form f1 x minus ct plus f2 x plus ct, and we have already plotted f1 and f2 using an example function, sinusoidal function, and we came to know that if f1 is moving wave towards right hand side, f2 will also be a moving wave towards left hand side. So F2 is basically mathematically representing the reflected wave after it hit the other end. So if this is F1 function, this is F2 function, and F1 and F2 will be equal or opposite or whatever, they depend on the boundary condition. If the boundary condition is fixed support, in that case the relationship between F1 and F2 will be different. So we can see that or understand that in a moment. So let's see with an example demonstration that how wave travel and then how they reflect back for both of the cases. One is the fixed end. So here in this figure, this is the point of the application of force. That is the other end, on the other side is the other end, which will be, once it will be fixed, and then second time it will be just flexible or nearly you can say a free support. So let me play that clip and then you will understand the reflection of the wave. So here this is one medium or one rod, you can think of it. So now one wave is being applied and now it is just reflecting back. It is for the case of fixed end. Now just see the loose end, or you can say a nearly free end. The reflection is different. So let me play it again and let me explain what is the difference between both cases. First, see the case of the fixed end. This is the fixed end on the other side. It is just clamped, and now you will see the reflection of the wave. This is the fixed end. The wave is applied, and you can see here that if the wave is having one direction like this while going. It is having the opposite direction while coming back. Just look at it again, that if the hand is moved towards right hand side, the reflected wave will be in the opposite direction. So now the wave is being traveled. Let me play it again, and it will travel, but it is having one direction while going. While coming back, it will be having the opposite direction. This is for fixed case. So you see here again, after he just uh, give the initial disturbance, he just hold that end like a fixed support. So his hand also considers, you can think of it as a fixed support once it is applied with an initial condition. So every time the wave move, let me play it again, you see and confirm that for fixed support condition, the direction of the wave changes, the disturbance direction becomes opposite when it comes back after reflection. So you see here the direction is being opposite. Again, the direction is being reversed. Now let's see the case of flexible end, not fixed end. In that case, the direction will remain same. Just check that one. Now this is the loose end. The other end is now loose. It is not fixed support. Can you confirm now that the direction of the wave remains same after the reflection? When it comes back, for fixed case, now again I repeat that the direction changes. See here, the going direction and coming back direction of the disturbance is opposite. This is for fixed end. Now this is for loose end. The direction in which the wave goes remains the same after reflection also. His hand is like a fixed support, so at his hand the direction of the wave changes, but at the loose end the direction doesn't change. Just keep that observation in mind and let me explain that mathematically in next few slides. So now let's discuss about the reflection of waves, that when the wave reaches the other boundary, it reflects back. The other boundary can have two conditions. I mean, the real condition obviously will be somewhere in between them, but we will only consider the two extreme cases. And one is the free end boundary condition, the free end and at x equal to L. And the second case can be the fixed end. So let me first explain the free end. And let's just write that observation which we just see in the video, and that was that if the other end is free, the reflected wave have the same direction as the incident wave or the approaching wave. So let's mathematically try to understand that. We now know that at free end boundary condition, the sigma will be 0 because there will be no restraint and no stress will be developed at that free end. For example, if you have a pile and let's say this is the ground surface, and if the other end is free end, for example, if you have a loose soil or very loose soil deposit, in that case the other end can be considered as a free end. If you apply some sudden force P of t, here at the free end there will be no stress which will be developed because now the point at the free end is allowed to vibrate freely. So no stress will be developed. So we now know that at free end at x equal to L, sigma equal to 0. This is for free end boundary condition. So let's put sigma equal to 0 at x equal to L. We have already derived this expression. That is simply saying that sigma of x comma t is equal to E times partial u over partial x. And u we have already assumed that it is having this form, f1 x minus ct plus f2 x plus ct. So we just wrote this whole expression for sigma L comma t. So x is replaced by L. So the first term is defining the approaching wave of stress, and the second term is is you can say defining or representing the reflected wave of stress, because their sum is equal to the stress, and that we know that it is zero at the boundary condition. So we should have the second term. It is necessary to introduce this wave term in order to satisfy the boundary condition. Let me explain it in one figure, for example. Let's say that this is the axial vibration of a rod case. This is the fixed support. Let's say this is the fixed support. So let's say that this is the shape of stress which is traveling in this direction. So it is traveling, and let's say that now it uh, hits the boundary end or the other end, which is fixed now. Now we now know, oh sorry, in this case there will be no fixed support. So let me just erase that one. So no fixed support, it will be free end. It will be free end. So let's say that that stress shape reaches to the free end. Now we now know that stress is zero at the free end. But one function alone will not become zero because it will have a non-zero value. One function, the first term, number one, let's say, this will still give us a non-zero value at the free end, because mathematically it is just a function which is in, for example, a sinusoidal function. So it will follow some sine function and it will give us some non-zero value. So we have to have the second function also, which should be opposite in that, you can say opposite in that case, which is opposite to the first wave. Let's call it function number 2, and it should have an exactly opposite shape, opposite value, so that they cancel out each other and the boundary condition is satisfied. The boundary condition is that stress at that free end, this is the free end, is zero. So we have to have two functions. If one function is positive, the other function should be negative. So if we cancel out this E value, we can simply write that the first term should be equal to minus of the second term. So at x equal to L, the gradient of the slope of the approaching wave, because this F1 is the approaching wave, so the gradient of the gradient slope of the approaching wave should be negative of the gradient slope of the reflecting wave. So if this is the approaching wave, which is like this, then this should be the reflected wave, that should be negative. That should be negative. This is, I am talking about the stresses and not the displacement. So this is the stress profiles, because the stress have to remain zero at free end here. So this is the result which we can physically see also. Uh, this is something which will convert into that result which we have seen. If we know this thing, we can also see that at F1 and F2 for free case, they should have the same sign, they should have equal magnitudes, because we can use this equation to derive this thing, because now we know that this quantity, this first term in the stress distribution should be minus of the second quantity in the stress distribution or stress profile. So if means that if, for example, this is the stress profile and it may have any shape, I was using the sinusoidal example, but let's say that this is the original function of the stress here, and let's say that this point, this surface or this boundary is the free end. This is the free end. So if the first term was x minus ct was the approaching wave, the x plus ct was the reflecting wave. So just when the x minus ct term have reached to the free end, the G2 term also have reached to the free end from the opposite side, which you cannot see. So this is your physical domain, but this is a mathematical domain on the other side of that rod, which you cannot see, but mathematically there should exist a wave which will just travel from the opposite side and it will cancel out the stress at the free end so that the boundary condition is fulfilled. So the reflection of displacement and stress wave at free end, this is about stress. For displacements, you can see here that if the f1 function, the original displacement of the incident wave or the approaching wave is having this shape, the reflecting wave f2 function will also be having the same shape, but basically it will having the same sign. So you can think of this f2 function as another wave which is coming from a hypothetical side and striking that free end, and now it is traveling in the opposite side of that rod which is you are observing. So the amplitude of the actual displacement, which is basically reflection after reflection, will be doubled. One, it will be having a incident or approaching wave, and after it strike, it will be doubled and it will come back uh, as a reflected wave. For stress case, they will be cancelling out each other. For displacement case, they will be just adding into each other. So the sign of the approaching sigma and reflecting sigma are opposite, but their amplitudes are exactly the same, so stress will be cancelled out. The displacement will be doubled at x equal to L. This is just try to now you can say confirm it or check it with that video which you have seen. For free end case, the reflecting waves was not changing its direction. So here you can see the f1 function and f2 function are having the same directions. F2 function is not negative. And for free end, you should know that the stress at the free end should be 0. So this is confirmed by this uh, sign, or you can say the variation of the G1 and G2 functions, where G1 function is the approaching stress and G2 function is the reflecting stress, and they are cancelling out each other. Now let's go to the second case, which was the fixed end case. And at fixed end, we know that stresses are not cancelling out each other. At fixed end, there will be some stress, but we know that the displacement at the fixed end is 0. So if, for example, the other end is not free and it is fixed, so if the displacement is moving towards downward direction, we know that it is sure that this point is not going to move. This is not free end now, it is a fixed end. So the boundary condition in that case would be u of L comma t will be 0. So please compare it with the previous boundary condition, which was stress of L comma t is equal to 0. That was for free case. Now this is for fixed case. Fixed case. So let's apply this boundary condition now. Since it is in the form of displacement, so we should put that displacement at x equal to L equal to 0. So displacement function was this one. It is again the sum of two functions. One was approaching wave, the other was the reflecting wave. So we have to have this reflecting wave. We should include that in the solution now, because this should cancel out the initial approaching wave in order to satisfy the boundary condition at that fixed end. So the approaching wave will be having the minus of the reflecting wave, which means that in this case the displacements directly will cancel out each other. Basically they will have the opposite signs. So at x equal to L, the displacement of the approaching wave is minus of the displacement of the reflecting wave. And this is what you exactly have seen in that video also. That when you are having the fixed boundary condition, the reflected wave changes its direction. If you give an incident wave or approaching wave towards the right hand side, the resulting wave, the reflecting wave will be towards the left hand side. So in this case where you have a fixed boundary condition, if the displacement shape is like this, any shape, at the free end you should have another hypothetical function f2. Basically it will remain hypothetical until f1 reaches to the boundary condition, and then it will become real and it will just move towards right hand side. So first just imagine that f1 is moving towards the fixed support. Once it hit, just assume that, and just consider now that f2 started moving exactly at that same time towards left hand side. So that's why you are actually seeing the opposite direction of the wave in case of a fixed support. However, in case of stresses, uh, they will now add up to each other, because they will not cancel just like the fixed case, free case. So now if this is the stress profile, stress shape like this, and this is the free end, sorry, fixed end. So this is the fixed end. Now at that fixed end, the same direction, or same, you can say, G2 function will have the same shape. If this is minus, this is also minus. So basically at the fixed end, they will add up into each other. So at fixed end, the stresses will become double, but the deformations will just cancel out each other. So displacements will be cancelled out, and the stresses will be added up and doubled. So in the free case, I wanted to just tell you one thing for the practical application. For example, if you have a pile which is resting on very loose soil, and let's say that it is same as the free end case, and let's say that you apply a P of T, which is the drop hammer. We know that if the incident wave is uh, is compressive wave, if it is positive, the reflected wave of stress, because if this is stress, if the reflected wave of stress will be negative in that case. Let me go back and show you, because they changed their direction at fixed, at free case. So an important point here is that, for example, if this is the compression stress, the reflection will be tension. This is the reflection which is tension, and that is in the case of fixed, free boundary condition, free end. So if you have a pile which is resting on loose soil, and let's say that it is applied with some P of T, which is compressive, the reflection stress, because this will be incident stress, the reflection stress will be tensile, that will be tensile. And if that pile is made of concrete, then concrete is weak in tension and strong in compression, so that even a small tensile stresses, they will be able to crack that concrete. So some people may not understand this, but they may think that we are simply applying a compressive force and the pile is still cracking. The reason pile is cracking is because of the reflected wave, and now it becomes a tensile stress. So that's why the pile may still crack even if you are applying a compressive impulse loading. So this is one example. Yes, please. One way you can understand this is that a wave is a local disturbance which is being traveled in that body. So whenever that medium uh, has a discontinuity, so at a free end here, now this is a discontinuity. The next material is loose. Okay, so that disturbance will reflect back. Okay, so it will dissipate only by the damping action of that material, and that we haven't modeled in our mathematical model. So only because of damping it will dissipate, that disturbance will dissipate. Or if you connect it with some other element which may have a higher damping, so it may dissipate. But in our case it is just, I mean, the soil example I am just giving you because uh, I just want to make it practical. Otherwise practically there is nothing here connected at that end. So that's why that reflection will come back. So this is one example of two different boundary conditions. Let's say that you are applied with some impulse loading here, P of T, and let's first take the case of the fixed support. So this is fixed support. So this is the incident wave. This dotted line is the incident wave, and this is the reflected wave is the solid line. This is the reflected wave. So for the case of fixed support, you can see here that the stresses of the incident wave and the reflected wave are added. So incident wave was producing this much stress, and because of the fixed support, the reflected stress has been added to that, and the total net stress is somewhere this high number. So the reflected stress is also compressive if the incident stress is compressive for the fixed case. So let me write a summary here that for fixed case at boundary condition, at boundary level, the displacements the displacements cancelled so that the boundary condition is satisfied, which is fixed, and stresses add to each other add to each other okay, with same sign. Add means that they will have the same sign. For free end case, free case at boundary, you will see that the displacements will be doubled. Displacements will be doubled. They will be add to each other, doubled. But the stresses will cancel out and and make the resultant equal to 0. So stresses will cancel out. I mean, they may not exactly cancel out each other. There will be still some net stresses, but obviously that net stress will be less than individual stress. So stresses will cancel out. Okay. So this is to ensure that the boundary condition is satisfied. The boundary condition for fixed case was that u at L comma t is 0. The free case boundary condition was stress at L comma t is 0. So we applied these two boundary conditions to get these two conclusions. So let's see the case of free end. So now this is the direction of the propagation of wave, and this is a free end. So now if the incident wave is compressive, the reflected wave is tensile, and they will cancel out each other at the boundary level, and the net stress will be this one. This dotted one is the net stress. This will be far less than if they would have added to each other. So this example illustrates us that how the boundary condition on the other end of the wave, they affect the reflection of the wave. So in this case, the pile is assumed to be rest on a soft mud, maybe a free end condition. So the reflected stress is tensile, so the net stress will be also some tensile stress. And this is how the fracture due to tensile stress might occur in piles, as I have explained earlier. Another example where you have two different medium, bar 1 and bar 2. This is also a discontinuity here there at interface because the material properties are changed. So whenever a wave which is traveling from one bar, when it moves to the second bar, some part of it will be reflected back, some part of it will be just traveling, it will just continue to travel to the bar 2. So that will be refractive wave, wave, and this one which will just come back, it will be reflected wave. So please note that these waves are one-dimensional waves. We are only talking about one-dimensional waves. So there may be case when you have let's say one layer of a material, layer 1 and maybe layer 2, and let's say that a wave is traveling in this direction. So whenever it will just pass through the interface of layer 1 and layer 2, some part of it will reflect back, some will just refract. So this is refracted, and this is reflected. Similarly, you may have several layers, layer 1, 2, 3, 4. So at each interface there will be the same phenomenon. There can be waves which just may follow a specific path, maybe like this. They may follow a specific path. There may be waves, for example, when they hit some object, they just scatter into all around disturbance in all directions. But all of these waves they all can be mathematically described by mathematical functions. We just uh, solve the governing equation of motion and we come up with a solution which physically also makes sense, which can actually describe or simulate a physical reality. So for example, the f2 function, which was actually representing the reflective wave, that was purely for mathematical reasons. Because if a function f1, which is a function of x minus ct, is satisfying, we have mathematically shown that x plus ct will also satisfy. But later we found out that that f2 function, which is x plus ct, is another wave which is traveling in the opposite direction. It is the reflected wave. By one dimensional, I mean that the wave can only move in one axis. If I have two axes, x and y, and if a wave is traveling both in x and y directions simultaneously, it will be a two-dimensional wave. Uh, One important point here is that it is not necessary that if there is one type of a wave in incident or approaching wave, it should retain its same type after reflection also. For example, a P wave, for example, if you have maybe layer 1 and layer 2 is a different material with a different C value. If a P wave is being propagated at that direction, it may reflect back as either a P wave or it may also reflect back as an S wave. Similarly, if some part of it is refracted in layer 2, that may also be either in P or in S also. So one type of wave can be changed into another type of wave when they pass through a certain, you can say, a boundary layer or interface between two different materials or any discontinuity in the medium. Think of wave as a disturbance, and that disturbance can affect different media or different materials in different manners. It depends on the material properties of those media, and it also depends on the boundary layer, or in fact the interface between two different media and their relative properties. uh, these kind of factors, they basically affect and they decide what wave should be converted into another wave, or what part should be reflected back, or what part should be refracted. So let's close this discussion here.